comments?
Yeah, I have, we are in the whole presentation assuming that you have mainly extended family and interaction of the kids with their family and everything else. Um, I don't think that a lot of this apply. The influence from outside, the media, the TV, the friends, the teachers are more powerful than the family right now. And we don't have extended family where people, the children can watch their grandparents or parents or all of this stuff. It's not there. So how we deal with the pressure, um, or actually, I would love to have the family influence more than what the outside influence, but it's not there.
I definitely agree with that, which is why in the presentation I left the word parents in quotation marks, because we are influenced by so many different um, entities, different areas. And with being influenced by all of these different areas, we have to acknowledge that we're pulling in, be it knowingly or unknowingly, from every one of them. Um, and this is why, as you said, with families, if you notice, a lot of families that, for example, with marriage, since I mentioned it, more families that have a two-parent household tend to lead to more two-parent households versus those who don't. Um, that is not to say that it can't happen because it does happen every day, but it's the susceptibility to um, what we what we see. I
Uh,
saw some.
there's a comment on there about influences of past behaviors. Are we thinking that's past behaviors of an individual or past behaviors as a generation as a whole?
as a whole.
Okay,
It's,
that's what I
um, so one thing that came to mind, because we're singles and we discussed singleness. My grandmother at 15 started asking me when I was going to get married. Now, historically, there was the benefit of marriage as far as home ownership, land, because especially for women, because women couldn't get bank accounts, women couldn't own land. Um, she had some of the influence of slavery because my great grandparents, who I actually got to know, born during just at the tip of freedom and different things of that nature. So she still had limited eyes of what women could and could not do. And most of them filtered around with having to be married. And it just, then my mother didn't pressure me as much, and there would be little hints. And I think that's to me, that's a curse because that's got to stop. We're not in the same era to change drastically, and that may be holding some people back from going further in things in their life.
you mean because if you're thinking where we would be held back because we were bowing down to the previous generations rather than adapting to modern times.
Right.
Yeah,
I think what
I can see that.
I think what Mishan is speaking to is especially towards women, maybe not the guys so much, but as a single woman, um, it's kind of looking like, oh, you got to get married. You got to get married because what will you do? How will you take care of yourself without a husband? So I think like that's the thing. It's more geared to women.
It really is. I know my mom, there was a time I felt, especially in my 20s, and 30s, that, for me, she felt the solution to every problem was a man. I'll never forget a friend of mine and me, we had a major falling out. And we're okay now. But at the time I was just hurt and just really dealing with it. And she comes up to me, you want to meet this guy? Are you really? like that's not even like on my radar right now. That has nothing to do with what's going on right now. And your solution to me and my friend falling out is you introducing me to some guy.
Mhm.
So it's that whole, and before them, they thought that too, oh, well, get a man, that'll fix everything.
Yeah, that's generational.
I
I
think
think.
too. I think too when we talk about more so generational things as well, it's abuse. We and what we're willing to accept. Some people may have grown up in households where they saw abuse on a regular basis and they think that that's maybe standard or normal, and so then those things kind of go down from generation to generation. So one thing that Sean said was, number one, recognizing this is something that is wrong. So, and I guess I'll just make it, more personal. Like I grew up not in my immediate family per se, but seeing a family member be abused. And it was just kind of one of those things where it was more so normalized. And I think too, we as a community and as a society, people of color, Black people, we tend to take struggle and pain, and we tend to normalize it and make that to where that's in
Okay.
every, kind of everyday happening, and not really recognizing the psychological effects. So I think more, even more so as individuals needing that healing from generations that is passed down. Somebody made a point earlier, I can't remember who it was, but it's also a healing of the generation that we live in as well. So I think it's more of a twofold, because once you're free of your individual generational curse per se, then there's more of a societal
Mm-hmm.
uh, curse more so as well.
Yeah, but I do think that society and generational do tie in, because there's because people expect certain things from us and we don't always live up to the narrative.
And the thing that becomes very important to keep in mind too is that all of this is going on within us all at the same time. Um, it's not like for example, even with this pandemic, the pandemic added to what we were dealing with. We were already still dealing with the common cold. We're already still dealing with flu seasons that come and go. We're already still dealing with all of these things. The outside influences or the new occurrences that we get introduced to are not replacing, but it is with. And so we have to be willing to look at our life in totality to bring global wholeness.
I think I have a slightly different perspective on the husband type of generational curse than what everybody quoted. Mainly because I too, like at a certain age, my mom started to tell me or ask me, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? And I didn't really take that as a generational curse, or she was putting a curse on me, or there was some type of curse as a result of her saying that. I honestly took it the complete opposite. I think she was, when she mentioned that, or kind of tried to influence me on, trying to pressure me on getting married, it was to actually stop a generational curse. Because my great aunt, who was married one time, very, very early in her life, her husband passed and she never married again, ever. And then my mom, she had a divorce from my husband one time and had my sister out of wedlock and never entered another relationship again. So I think she sees a trend with her own children, because my sister, she is kind of she's a special case, but my sister is really not heavy on trying to be married. And then my mom is, I'm probably her only hope, because, I show more interest in wanting to be in a relationship with someone. So I think she pushes that on me to break a generational curse of women in my family not being, in a happy household raising kids. So that's just my perspective on that.
Definitely. And it's one of those things where there is no one size fits all.
Mhm.
Because, like what you just said, with one example can be a complete opposite for the next individual. And the cool thing about it, though, it sounds like your mom has recognized that trend, and then you yourself are now able to acknowledge it, and understand where she's coming from to be able to do something different than what has been done before.
Right.
Mhm. So I mentioned before that I wrote a book, and that was kind of how God finally got me to do it, because I was very resistant. One, because of somebody, I'm sorry, I can't remember who, because I'm on my phone, so I can't see everybody at one time, but someone was saying about the family and the things that have happened in the past. um there was some reticence for me in not wanting to like out people, like I didn't want to
Mhm.
necessarily um blame or make people feel bad, I guess is the easy way to say it. um it wasn't that it wasn't true, it was just like, that happened, and that was in the past, and we're moving on, and it's over. But God was trying to show me that it wasn't over, not for me. That all of these, like, spent a better part of a decade showing me how it wasn't over. All these decisions that I made, that were life-changing decisions for me, that were made based on what happened to me growing up. Like, I developed very young. I was like 8 years old when I started wearing a bra, not a training bra, a real bra. And so I never felt safe because I got a lot of attention. And so I married someone who made me feel safe. And just little things like that people that I maybe would have been better for me, but because they didn't make me feel like they was going to protect me, I didn't choose to be with them. The way that I taught my kids, the way that I dealt with people, my lack of trust in people, different things that I was doing. And I recognized that because of me being a single parent, and not single parent like, oh, we're not together, but actually my husband being deceased, that my children were taking from me, straight. It was, they weren't there was no comparison. They was taking straight from me their instructions and directions on life. And I needed to, of course you want to teach, but what I realized was, and this is probably true for everybody on here, your parents don't want you to make the same mistakes, but they don't tell you the story. They tell you not to do things, or to be careful of this, or make sure you do that, but they don't tell you the story that led to the lesson that they're trying to teach you. And so it's almost like trying to tell a person how to get somewhere without giving them any um signposts or landmarks. So just, they didn't plan to get where they got, that they was like, oh, this is not where I want to be. And neither did we in certain things in our life. We realized, like, um okay, I mean, when you get there, you're like, yeah, my mama told me not to do this, but you're there now. But if you know the story,
Mhm.
then you can see, like, oh, wait a minute, we passing the big, the big circle over there, and that's that crooked tree. We're going the wrong direction. We need to turn around, because I already heard what's at the end of this road. But you know, you want to tell the story so that it's not like, this is how you get out of it, but this is how you don't get in it to begin with. And
Yeah,
so
I think that's shame. A lot of that, people are ashamed to share, what they've gone through. And I think especially with us being Christian, that's why our testimonies are so important, because we can overcome things, and help people overcome things with our testimony. So you spoke a word. You took me to church this
She
morning,
did.
sister.
She did.
Appreciate you.
Well,
You
it's hard. I mean, it's hard for the person because you're revisiting that pain. And for me, I did exactly what the person that was speaking before said. It happened, and I just like, okay, I just need to survive this. I just need to, to move on. And then at the point where I had children, I definitely wasn't sitting with it and really experiencing those negative emotions because I needed to keep myself together. And so when God told me, I need you to write this, and the way that I wrote it, I had to actually re-experience those things. And he showed me, because one of them was, I don't want my kids I don't want this to be their vision of their father, because I mean, my daughter was 2 months old, my son was 3, and I didn't want them to think this was all that there was to him, as well as, my parents and different things. But he told, God was showing me, if you really want to protect your kids, you have to help them to understand the why. You have to show them, because they're going to do some of the same things, not realizing that they're creating the situation by the choices that they're making because they don't know better. And so that's what got me to, to go ahead and because I'm like, yeah, for my kids, I gotta, of course, do whatever I gotta do. But that is something that, I mean, our parents don't always know that I didn't do any of those things because I thought I was teaching my kids wrong. But as I realized, what was behind it, I was like, oh man, that's, I don't want them to be that way. I don't want them to live that way, especially based on something that wasn't even, their problem. It wasn't something that they had to deal with. What I did was so that they would not experience those things and come to those conclusions. So I certainly don't want them to manifest those things in their life, because I've taught them to see the world a certain way or live a certain way. And I want them, to have a better experience. And so I need them to understand and see it so that they can, make better choices based
So
on my understanding. Go
I
ahead.
have a question. I don't know if anyone on here is in the mental health field or whatever, but we talk about this from a spiritual aspect, and I believe in that too. But what about the mental health aspect of breaking those cycles?
So, on the mental part of it, that's where consciousness come in, or mindful thinking comes into play. Because as Scripture even teaches us, that as a man thinketh, so is he. So if we want to be whole, we have to take care of the mental process as well. And the mental process is broken through the acknowledgement and um, being able to have resolution in your mind,
So
to
so
know.
you so you do. I'm sorry. I'm driving. I'm sorry, guys, for
No
the noise.
problem.
So you all do advocate for not only prayer and
Certainly,
God and things like that, but you do also advocate for seeking out counseling.
definitely. And so, and honestly, and for me, I believe in what I call holistic ministry. I'm not going to just tell you, oh, just pray, it'll be okay. But I also have to give you something actionable, something that you can be doing. And this is where, at the end of the presentation, where I spoke about giving those affirmations to yourself, because of the fact that when you begin speaking them, you then are able to readjust yourself in those areas. And then knowing that there are some things that you cannot handle on your own. There are some things that will take one someone else that has been there before, or two, someone that is able to help you organize your thoughts and organize how you're processing whatever the situation is.
Because I've gotten into this kind of debate before with people that are just and again going back to more so society, our culture or whatever, that just say, oh honey, this just that ain't nothing but the devil, you just need to pray. And the way I see it is sometimes the miracle is in the wisdom and knowledge that the medical community has. There are counselors, there are people that see these repetitions and patterns over and over, and so
Mhm.
I'm very much an advocate of the spiritual and also what's available down here.
I'm not necessarily in the medical field, but because of what I do, I read a lot of psychology books and, I take the time to invest in stuff like that. If you want to put like the biblical part of it aside and really speak on the mental, a lot of generational curses really manifest itself into addiction. When you think about it, generational curse could easily be, transferred into like obesity in a family. Like they said, abuse and those type of things. It's an addiction in some sense. Like that's what you constantly feed yourself. Those images, the products, those things that you constantly feed yourself when you live by yourself. It didn't start with yourself. It started with the way you were raised. So to break those things, yes, definitely therapy is one of them, because even one of the shows that I watch often, 600 Pound Life, some of these people, when they are on the journey to, correcting things that were in their past, they go to counseling and didn't know that the abuse or the molestation that they experienced as a child is manifesting on why they do eat so much. Or someone who is always suffering from depression doesn't realize I'm suffering from depression because of my mom, of things that I learned from my family, of probably lack of communication and not speaking to, not knowing how to communicate with people in my family. So I take it upon myself. So of course, there's a level where you have to step aside and say, hey, okay, I need God to help me find the way, to bring peace into my life. But also you need coping mechanisms that I feel like counseling could help you with.
Yeah,
Yes, I
that's a
agree.
good point, Natalie, because that's something that I learned in trying to navigate everything as a young parent was um, people just assume that you're gonna just automatically know how to cope with things. You have
Mm-hmm.
to teach coping skills. That's not something that you're just born with. And so, not that it's a generational curse, but what we do in our families is what we're teaching as the coping skill. So if it's drinking or it's womanizing or, arguing and fighting, whatever, you see demonstrated, that's what you're taught is the way that you deal with, negative issues or negative emotions or, things that occur. Sometimes silence, not saying anything, and
Right.
just internalizing it, blaming yourself. Those are the things that we're teaching as coping when we don't constructively decide how we're going to teach. And it's amazing to me how difficult the mental health society is when it comes to children and teaching them how to cope and deal with things. It might be better now because my son is 24, but trying to get him grief counseling was it was an eye-opening experience. It was very difficult. I had to kind of create a method for him because I wasn't getting it from psychiatry. And he went to a few different places, grief counseling, group counseling for children, for grief, all these different things. And I was just like, okay, I'm not educated in this area. So maybe it's just me, but I'm not understanding how this is helping because what are you actually telling them to do with these feelings? What are you teaching
Mm-hmm.
them? What tools do they have when they're struck in class or, wherever they may be, and they just, and it hits them. What are you teaching them to do? And that's, I think, sometimes the miss in counseling is just a practical, do this thing when you're feeling like, when it just takes you, this is what you can do to, pull yourself back together, or to teach them how to let go of it and not, hold it in and actually, work through those emotions.
I guess I had a different experience with my son, because when my ex and I separated,
Mm-hmm.
did seek out for him, and I did my research on a counselor and found one that was specifically targeted to uh, grief and separation counseling for children. And what it allowed him to do was to speak freely to, an unbiased third party, so, and to be able to get out that anger and those feelings. And I saw it help him.
Yeah. I think the hard part was, and the psychiatrist that I finally ended up going to said, sometimes kids want to protect people from their bad feelings, and so they won't talk about it. And so my son used to talk about everything else, and my whole thing was, how do we get him to talk about it? I mean, not that I'm trying to shortchange, but I ain't got a lot of money, so I need y'all to teach him how to open up, because that was the problem. I think it would have worked fine if he was very willing, but he was resistant to talking about it, and that was the problem, was teaching him to how to get there where he could let it out. But I think, whatever age you are, I think counseling is always good, because we all have things that we need to work through, and that we've kind of just dismissed as not being very important, or that we don't realize is affecting us until we do have that sounding board to say, well, this happened, and you like, okay, well, and the counselor is saying, okay, let's talk about that. What do you mean? And then you realize, oh, okay, that was normal for me, or that was normal for my family, but actually this is why these things are happening or have happened, because of this thing that I didn't realize, had really affected me in a way that I didn't see.
I want to say something about that, Tajon. You've been touching on some stuff today, because you talk about your son not talking. I have the same problem. I have a 23-year-old son who doesn't tell how he feels. He'll talk about everything else but his feelings. Whereas the little one, oh, he's going to tell you he's feeling blue and why. So they're different personalities, right? That's a different thing too, is the personalities. But I can say, as far as him, I did some research to help him, because I could tell he's struggling, because that's my son. I know something's bothering you. You just not telling me what it is.
Exactly.
And so I used to bring up casual things, leave stuff out and just talk about it. And I kind of put the responsibility on me. And so as parents, sometimes we are expected to be the person who has it all together. But I had to actually be transparent myself and say, I'm struggling with some things. That's how I helped him, because he was feeling like, especially a son protecting his mother, he's like, I gotta be strong,
Yep.
But I wanted him to know, listen, it doesn't have to do with you being a man and me and a female thing. We are all human. And this life experience is tough, especially to be a believer and try to walk this thing. And you got all these different, the media tells you how you're supposed to cope. They tell you get a girlfriend. They tell you have sex. They tell you drink, smoke, hang, and stuff like that. So who do you listen to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, a combination of the counseling and a whole lot of fervent prayer on my part, I think, because one day he actually surprised me, and he initiated conversation with me about what he was feeling and what he was going through. And I said, man, God, because sometimes you pray about things and you do things and you don't know if they're actually sinking in. You just like don't know if it's gonna do any good. But that's where our faith comes in. You like, it's got to, I'm not doing this just in vain,
Right.
and it helped me too. I mean, to the point where I will say pretty recently in January, I honestly had to tell my son, I'm not managing well right now. That's what I said. I am not managing emotionally and mentally. I am not managing. And I was afraid to do that because I didn't want to lose his respect, maybe, or maybe him feeling like I'm weak,
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think my son and I were closer now because he realizes mom goes through too, and it's really stems from, I had a crazy upbringing. I mean, we were from Washington, D.C., in the hood, in the city, but then we moved out into the suburbs of Prince George's County area in Maryland. And where it's all peaches and cream, like white picket fences and stuff, but that doesn't change what's going on in the household and what's going on with the family. So people on the outside looking in think everything is kosher, but my cousins are bringing men in and out the back door. I'm seeing this. I'm a kid. I hear the door open at night. They smoking, and we had woods. We had 2 acres of backyard. Y'all smoking and doing drugs and all kind of stuff in the backyard. And me as a kid and me and my siblings, we see this stuff because we're up in the middle of the night. We know what's going on. And so, that's years of being subject to other people's vices, and you have nowhere to go because this is where you live and you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're an adult and you have to find a way. Like I said, you were touching on it because all you know is what you don't want to do, but you don't know how to not do it.
Yep.
Hmm.
That
So
Davida,
Davida
I
has,
want to say I'm glad that you said that about telling your son that you were in a weak moment and you weren't coping, because I think another thing that we tend to pass on, especially us as Black women, we tend to pass on the myth of the strong Black woman, right?
Yeah.
And the I don't need a man type woman. And then it conditions the men, to act a certain way as well. And I think that that's another generational passed down from person to person, which becomes a societal curse. Because I don't know about the women on this line, we're all different, but I'm the type, I want a man to, I'm not going to say quote unquote take care of me, but just to protect me and to be there. But a lot of times our men will see a Black single woman and they'll think, oh, she's a strong Black woman, she doesn't need a man. And I'm like, no, I need you to check my tires and wash my car and get that heavy, lift that heavy thing, like,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
But
I hear that 10 times a day. I hear it 10 times a day. But yes, I don't need, I do need a partner and a brother. But if you just want to come around, for sex or something like that, no, I don't need that part. But I do need to be able to commune with you and share with you, you know. And so if it seems like, I'll tell you a short story. I was propositioned by a brother at my job, and he kind of like was very forward with his physical advances. And I turned him down, and he said, "Oh, you strong." And I was just like, "Well, why does no? I'm dignified." But the thing is, just because I'm a single woman, you think I'm painting for a physical interaction. No, I need more than that. Being a strong Black woman does not mean that we do not need or value the contributions of a man. That's a whole separate thing. A strong Black woman, I think, knows more than anyone how much she does need a man in her life.
so
Yeah, I don't even like that term, strong
I
Black
don't
woman. I don't
either. I
even like
don't
it.
like it, but I've heard it
I
all the
don't.
time. What does that mean?
I think Tony brought up a good point with societal curses, because she really took that word out of my mouth. And a major societal curse I feel in the Black community is not going to counseling. Like that is like the biggest myth ever. Like I hear people say time and time again, oh, why do I need to tell a complete stranger my problems? Da, 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 da. But then yet you could tell your best friend your problems. Yeah, it's not a complete stranger, but they don't give you no tools at all to help you to become a better person. So I think that's the myth I really feel like, and I hope and pray that we as a Black community really breaks that cycle, that generational or that societal curse.
So Danny, you had your hand up earlier. Do you want to say anything more about what you put in the chat?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to break the flow of the conversation. But I agree. I agree with everything that was said so far. What I put in the chat, and just to expand on your point, Sean, which I thought was so it was very helpful for me, because we use the term generational curse, and I think many of us as Christians, we know what that term means. But what I took from your presentation, and perhaps you can elaborate on it just to make sure that we understood it fully, but the difference between generational curse versus generational cycle, because I really like that word cycle, because I think it lends itself to being seen, right, as a pattern, as opposed to, I think when we think about a curse, at least when I think about a curse, I don't think of it as something that I can see replicated in a very tangible way, whereas cycle just sounds like something that I can actually pinpoint and identify, right, and it's being perpetuated over different generations. And I think too, even just changing the narrative, right? Changing the way that we speak about these things. So using cycle versus curse, understanding that it's something that I can identify it. I'm empowered to change it. How do I change it? And also just thinking about being forgiving. So as you were talking, one of the words that I wrote down was, and I think Tachan actually said this again, when she talked about she was inspired to write a book. And I thought, how many of us, and I have this way about me too, I can write something down and see cycles and patterns better than if I am not writing it down. And so sometimes just the power of the written word is really important. And I wanted to share with the group also that, in talking about this stuff with my friends who are, and I know we don't like that term strong woman, but I think just for purposes of being on the same page, I'm a strong woman. My friends are strong women. We're all at different periods in our lives in terms of who is single, who is a single mom, who is married, et cetera, right? And one of the things that I saw was just, as we grow older and we are daughters to, of course, parents, women, mothers who are growing older themselves, just the type of relationships that we have. One of the really profound things that I've been experiencing is the power of really speaking in a very forgiving way to my mom, right? Because what I define as strength, she may not have had the resources, tools, etc., to do things a certain way when she was coming up as I am now. And it was just so freeing for me, and I think for her as well, to be able to even have those conversations, because I'm thinking, how could we not have been having these conversations all along when you're a woman, I'm a woman, I'm looking to you for education. I would like to be able to pass those things down to my child. One day if I have a daughter, I would like to be able to talk to her about those things. And it was just a cascade of things. And I saw the same with my friends as well. We weren't having conversations. And it's really because I think our mothers, they were never taught to have those conversations. And it's not always about embarrassment. Some of it is that, but they just never spoke. We were taught to be silent. So we were taught, even as kids, to be seen and not be heard. And those things are being perpetuated over time. So I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I just wanted to offer, some of the things that I was hearing and check in with you, Sean, to see if my interpretation of curse versus cycle was on point. Thank you.
Well, so actually, based on the presentation, they're used interchangeably. And that's something that I wanted to say. When we use the word curse, we often think about either hellfire and damnation from heaven, or we think about the witches and goblins with the pointy hats and all of that. But it is um, it's more prevalent to us than something that is just out this far out, mystic type of space. And so when you say curse, it is something that is cyclical. Um, and that's where I think the language itself of cycle tends to show you, as you said, that pattern.
I want to bring up something that Tajan and Danny just brought up. The fact that, as children, and our parents would tell us, don't do something without like giving the reasoning behind it. I wonder if that subconsciously brings on the curse. Because I know as a child and many other people, if you're told not to do something and not told why, the curiosity spikes and we end up doing it anyway to try to figure out, why was I told not to do this? And then in essence, we perpetuate the curse or the cycle because we're curious about it and we want to know why we can't do it. So again, that replicates it into another generation or another level of the family. And it's just like, I wonder if we did take the time to stop and explain, would the cycle continue?
That's a really great point, and sometimes that is true. For example, I'll use an example of alcohol. In other countries, the legal age to drink is lower. And in some of those other countries, alcoholism is also lower because of the fact that it is not made as this ceiling that you're waiting to break. But normalizing the conversation will help us to be able to not have that glass ceiling there to begin with. And that's one of those things where, as I always say, the hardest thing to do in the world is to be vulnerable. Because when you speak about the why of why I'm saying don't do that, you're exposing the fact that you did do it. You're
Right.
exposing a part of your personal struggle, whether you have overcome it or not overcome it. Because that's another piece. Some of the don't do is because I'm living it right now and
Mm.
I've just been hiding it from you all this time.
Oh,
Mm.
that's something. So
Yeah. So I give you a simple example of, because that I think that is true. But when like I said, I'm older, so this was the 90s. No, this was the 80s. I grew up in a nice suburb in Southern California. You can, very, very nice, very safe. But I used to visit my family in Chicago in the summer. And the CTA, the mass transit out there, take you anywhere you want to go. So I was 11. I had a cousin that was just shy of a year older than me, and we had places that we were allowed to go. But we're on public transportation, so the city is ours, okay? And we were told the Taste of Chicago would come every year, and for people that don't know, it's like restaurants come and set up little booths, and they give you a little taste, and they have the radio stations out there with music and everything, and so it's like a festival. So we were told specifically not to
not
go
to
to the
go to the
Taste.
taste, right?
But we know that that's where, that's where
That's the
everybody
party.
is. Right. That's,
Yeah.
there's music out there. Everybody's out there. You want to hang out, have a good time or whatever. And I was, you guys know I'm a nerd, so I was not into a bunch of stuff, but it was, it was like, well, we don't want to go somewhere boring where, we weren't shoppers. We didn't have no money, so we couldn't go to the mall or anything. So we went straight to the Taste. And while we were there, 11, 12 years old, of course, guys were trying to talk to us, and we're so young that we understood that they were trying to talk to us, but the questions were, how old are you? Do you have any kids? Now, I told you I'm 11, and you asked me if I have kids. So already I'm like, what? I said I'm 11. And then, do you want some girl? Do you want some China? They're asking about, and of course, I'm from the suburbs. I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm just like, I'm gonna say no because I don't know what you're talking about. But now flip it, me talking to my daughter in Las Vegas, one of the trafficking, human trafficking centers. I told her at 11, look, because she developed early too, not as early as me, but still, I had a straight up conversation. When people look at you that ain't the right people, they see money. You need to have your head on swivel at all times. People are out here trying to figure out how to get you in the car, grab you, whatever. I mean, I gave her like the rundown. I wasn't giving no general, like, don't go here and don't do that, because with me and my cousin being out there, we figured out, okay, this is not a safe place for us. Mm-hmm. But, people weren't out there like they are now, where, you're going to find out it's not a safe place and you ain't going to be able to leave.
All right. Can I say something, Tejan? Because this tying in what you said, and also Danny. You're right. We come from our parents and our grandparents' generations where, children are seen and not heard, and certain things where it was not proper to discuss, But now our task as parents and as adults, responsible adults who have young people in our wings, we have to give it to them straight. I mean, age appropriate, but really straight, because like Ramses was saying, the media and the entertainment that is out here now is so in your face. And that is what we are competing with. And I don't want my children and the children in my care to be blindsided. Because if I can tiptoe around the situation, they're not getting something from me that I'm tasked with. So as some of y'all may know, I work in an elementary school. I'm not a teacher, I'm an administrator, but kids come to my office, and part of me working in an elementary school is because I have 2 children. God bless me with 2 kids, but I come from a big family of 13. And I'm used to being around promotion and kids, and that is a comfort for me. So I said, my dream job, I work in an elementary school and I have tons of kids that I influence and stuff like that. But when I tell you, it surprised me, because before I was in a position that I'm in now, I worked for a middle school where we had, and I was a registrar, so I work in the counseling department, 11 and 12-year-olds having sex in the bathroom at the middle school. And the police were up there. We have what you call a resource officer, SRO, special resource officers. They're police that are assigned to schools. And it happened so much, it made me sick to my stomach, because I'm like, not just for the girls, I'm a girl, but not just for the girls, but for the boys. It's like, who taught you? You're too young. You're too young. So it started to weigh on me. I put in for a promotion, got the promotion, and now I work in an elementary school. And when I tell you, I was surprised to find out it doesn't start at 11 and 12. It is at 5 and 6, where they are seeing things, And so I think about generational curses, because from the time that our children are able to talk and walk, that is when they are targeted. Okay, that is we wrestle not against flesh and blood in this place. Okay, they start to target young people so early, and the influence on them, sex and drugs, and oh, you like him, oh, she got a big butt. Like, what are you talking about? At 6 years of age, who told you that that was attractive? You know, because you're sitting in the house, you're watching videos because mom is working or dad is not, you know, they're not around. And so I just wanted to bring up the fact that it starts so young. And oftentimes people think, oh, well, they're a teenager now. Now I need to start having these conversations. No, you have to start when they're very young. And try to, not only that, what I'm in the position of doing is trying to counteract some of the damage that's already been done. And me going through what I did in my household, yeah, I was developed, plus I was tall. So people thought I was older than what I was, you know, and I had to, my parents didn't teach me how to carry it. They did not teach me what to do when I'm in those situations. And so I got exposed to things, I mean, at a young age. Um, you can walk in the grocery store. I'm 13 years old. I'm picking up Cosmopolitan magazine, thinking it's a ladies magazine. All they talk about is sex and what to do. And they're very graphic about it. And it's that's not an adult shop, that's the grocery store.
Right.
So if I'm walking to the grocery store with my cousin, you know, it's out there.
Can I
So
ask a question to the group as a collective? Because we're talking about these cycles and you know, all of us, I'm assuming all of us here are single. Um, and how does this translate or work in the dating realms when we're all kind of managing or dealing with these, being at these different places and these different cycles? Like what's the takeaway from this? I mean, is it a
Is
situation to where you need to deal with yourself first before you get into the dating realm, or is it we that are dating, we have to just have more grace when it comes to dealing with people and where they are in life? Like, how does this
the where
pour
this
into the
plays
dating scene?
I
where
think,
this plays oh, go ahead, CJ.
no, I think it's yes to both. I think you got to have an accurate assessment of and think about what you're thinking about and understand who and what you're about and your strengths and your weaknesses and you know what you maybe need some work, but you also have to assess, and that's part of the dating process, is where's this person at and what are they bringing to the table and what issues, you know, the questions you're asking about when it's, you know, when you're talking about their family and you're talking about your family, is that a meshing situation, or is that something you can't, you know, deal with, or, you know, maybe they're not the person for you. But I think you have to assess both of those things. Where am I at and where are they at?
I personally think it's pivotal before you start a relationship to really assess what your supposed generational curses are, or just habits in general, you know, that might be stopping you from developing relationships with really anybody. Because the goal, you know, to having a meaningful relationship with someone of the opposite sex is to be friends first, right? So I think when it comes to any, like I said, any relationship is going to start as a friend. And I feel as though, like, really diving deep into what your I don't want to call it curses when you're talking about yourself, but like basically mishaps, you know, when it comes to things about your personality or things that might be holding you back. And I really feel like taking accountability and doing self-awareness really plays a really serious part in developing any healthy relationship. And I think going back to counseling, you can determine what those things are, and you can determine how to get healthy relationships. Because if you want to talk about generational curses and not addressing them, those are definitely going to show up in your relationships if you don't address them.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying,
Also,
like, for
if you're
like, if I'm,
dating
oh,
with
go
the
ahead.
intention, if you're dating with the intention to get married, not only are you marrying that person, you're marrying that person's family. And so
True.
you can
Yep.
learn, you will learn, especially if you do the premarital counseling, you're going to learn what
Yep.
they learned from their family about marriage and how that is affecting. And that marriage is taught generational.
Hmm.
It's not just that, it's what happened yesterday and before yesterday. It's all of that. And you need to know that because you got to plan for how you're going to manage the marriage.
And like for us on this call, we're starting the project. We're doing the work, right? Um, I believe all of us on the call, we're uh, doing our self evaluation. We're praying. We're seeking counseling. We're working on those things. But I think a lot of times we may be in the minority when it comes to the greater collective. And I just, what do you guys
So
think about that?
that is where the faith walk comes into play because you're right. We would be, even in areas where a person want to profess Christianity but not really be a Christian. That's where all we can do is trust that God is leaning in our favor. And that's where in prayer, we do ask Him to direct our path so that we're connected to other individuals
Yep.
that have the same mindset that we have, that really are looking for something meaningful and lasting. Um, and then by doing so, you will then also be afforded the opportunity from Christ to be able to be the help me. Because when you're being a helpmeet, you're not just helping yourself, but you're helping one another through that process.
Absolutely. I think that goes back into kind of what I said last week about being equally yoked in every facet of relationship. And I already know, like, if I'm dating someone and you tell me, oh, I don't believe in counseling, you're not the one automatically, because I am such a big proponent of counseling, because I feel that, one, if you're afraid of counseling, then that tells me you got something in you that you're not ready to confront. So whatever that is that you can't confront, how can I already assume that you're going to have good communication styles and skills with me? There's no way. So if you're telling me that you're allergic to counseling, guess what? We can't be together, because for one, when I go through something, yeah, I want to talk it out, and it's not going to be with your mama and them. It's going to be with a professional, to help us get through what we're getting through, because like, even if you don't want to see a physical professional, we still seek the counsel of God. So are you telling me that you'll never get to the point where we're communicating and communing together to get answers and to go through things? So that's a big red flag to me if you feel like you're not willing to communicate and go and seek counseling.
I think that's a really good point. And we're kind of fighting against the perception that counseling is something bad. And I think that's just like for the last generations. I mean, if you think about our parents' generation, a lot of people didn't go to the doctor when they were feeling sick. Like even going to physically when you're hurt, going to the doctor is like, no, I'll just, the famous joke is just put some Robitussin on it, whatever it is. Again, a broken bone, just put some tussin on it, but it's like when you talk about mental health, there was just that much more of a stigma. And, it's not, we're just now realizing how important it is to, clean out those old destructive, family thoughts that maybe you didn't even have an active choice in picking up. You just saw it demonstrated in front of you, and it's recognizing it, isolating it, and sweeping it out. And that takes something beyond yourself a lot of times. So counseling is an asset, not a liability. As far as
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree,
I
Chuck.
want
Tony, I just wanted to add to an answer to your question. My my grandparents' generation, they were married long, long marriages, stuff like that. But my father's generation and my parents' generation, nobody's marriage stayed together. Nobody. And what I came to see, and it took a long time. I mean, my husband would tell me, even my son, when he was growing up, he would tell me. But because I was indoctrinated in the culture of my family, it took a long time for me to realize that the culture of my family is very vicious, and it's clothed in this nice, it's like this nicety. Like it seemed like it's a compliment, but it's really a backhanded compliment. It seems like you being nice, but you really digging. My family has perfected that thing. I mean, we can
Mm.
teach some classes, and it's so strong that most of them don't realize. Like I'm trying to teach my little sister, because she has to talk to people all day, and so it's like reinforced all the time. And I'm like trying to show her, because I have some guilt about the way that I treated my own children, because I was so harsh, but I didn't know. It took time. But saying all that to say, when it comes to being in a love relationship, being in a relationship with a significant other, kindness is important. And I mean, my husband took it, and we would go back and forth some or whatever, but in his mind, he's like, you're supposed to be softer than this. You're supposed to be a soft place for me to land. Like you making, because if he not in public, he was, the king. But in private, I'm like, you messed up. What is going on? What you doing? And he's like, so that things like that are why we, relationship wise, we need to see it. We need to understand why we do things. And then we need to understand how, not just how it affects us, but how it affects the people around us that are trying to love us, that are trying to be a part of our lives. Because sometimes we feel like, well, people always leaving me. Well, no, you always pushing people away. So there's things that you just kind of have to realize your part in it. And sometimes it's because you were taught certain behaviors that you think are just, this is just how you live. And it's like, not everybody.
Well, Tayshawn, I gotta agree with you on the difference between our parents and grandparents, and being that we're the same generation. I think we can thank Woodstock for that. Like, because my parents were like in their mid to late teens when Woodstock happened, and then that generation looked at the older and said, well, you guys are old fogies, and we have a better idea because we can have sex without commitment. We don't need a piece of paper to live together and have children. We don't need all that, and we know what's better. And then now we're realizing, you know what, those old people had a good point. I saw my grandparents and their generation, and I saw my parents and their generation, and I know who I wanted to be like, and who had more stability. And it wasn't my parents' generation. So I took on what more or less my grandparents' generation did, because I felt their ways were better. I felt it was more stable. Well, because it was.
And I could even say for myself, like I said, my parents are divorced, and then going back to both sides, my grandparents separated. Um, but what I then had to understand for myself, then this is not what I want to look at or what I want. Um, and then so from there, I have a coworker right now. He and his wife love them. Their relationship is so amazing to me. Um, I can remember he told me about it. And then his wife showed me the text where she said it. I was like, don't ever think about leaving me, because the moment you do, I'm going to kill you. And that is definitely a very strong bond. And that's what I want. But now I will say in the same breath that although I don't see what I do want from within my house, what it did show me are some of the markers to watch out for of what I don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I was definitely gonna say that I agree with actually all three of you last ones, and actually what a lot of people are saying. But I think the last generation is really complicated. I think it's a mixture of new changes in the way that people see women's roles, new changes in the way society sees these roles, anger from women who were mistreated in the past in various different ways, and all those things basically being combined, because for a lot of grandparents, a lot of women and men stayed in those relationships just simply because they either had nowhere to go, or things were just so bad for you, or the stigma was so bad for you if you were single. But now we praise people a lot of times for being single and different things like that. And I think we need to remember those types of things. So I think it's complicated. I think there's so many different things, especially when we start talking about divorce or single parenthood, because it's extremely complicated. Because let's be real. I mean, the main reason why you have feminism, and even you have, for like stuff like Black Lives Matter, is because you have a group of people that really, even though they look at the facts, even though they look at people in pain, they basically say, well, we don't care. This is how we want to do it, and we just don't care. And anytime you have a group like that, that causes problems. And then those people become a lot more on edge when dealing with it. So of course, you're going to have more women that encourage their daughters. Well, you got to watch out. He's not going to be good. You don't know. He might do you wrong. You got to have your safety net. Because there are men in the past who have done women wrong. Let's just be honest. As men, we have to be honest. There's been generations of men who have treated women like crap. Same thing. There's not, well, I think most police officers are good. I think 99% of them are good. There's still a percentage of them that have treated people like crap. Okay. And those people need to be punished. And so I think we cannot make excuses for everybody, but we have to look at the very complicated thing of why we ended up at this point. But I also think that that's also why we're Christian, and we go back to the concept that we have to forgive. Because see, the root of it all is pain. Even when I look at stuff right now on YouTube, and you start to look at the manosphere, and I think I've talked to everybody about the manosphere, so all the new people, forgive me. But the manosphere is just a place where guys go and hang out and they talk about relationship issues. But a lot of what's happening in the manosphere is men being angry, because the common media right now is leaning towards women and is listening to women's problems, but it's not listening to men's problems. So now you have the manosphere, and if you go over in there, most of those men are angry. All they do is talk badly about about women. But then there's a part of YouTube where there's a whole lot of women and they hang out, and all they do is talk bad about men. When at the root of both of them is just pain. So we have to learn to forgive. And I think that's one of the key elements, like I say again, to be Christian, is to forgive, so that all these generational curses can start to leave you. Because even if you go to like one of the things that Tashawn's saying about her family, or anybody else was saying about their family, well, you have to forgive your mother and father. You have to forgive your grandpa, your grandmother, and your auntie and them, and your cousins that was doing drugs. If you can't forgive them, then that pain still stays in your heart. But once you forgive them, I believe at least that you're able to free yourself at least of that internal pain, so that you can move on. Recognizing that everybody's human and we all make mistakes. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
JL, I so agree with that. Like, that's what I was getting at. That and that was my personal experience, because I did not go, and I think somebody said this at the beginning of today's topic, but I didn't go in the direction of, okay, well, let me run off and get married. Because although I guess my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, I wouldn't say that we have like a strong example of marriage or not being married. I would say, if anything, it's probably split. But what I did receive, or what I did, I guess, tell myself based on what I was seeing was, okay, well, you're strong. You're going to, get a good job. You're going to pursue your education. So without even understanding what I was doing, I was really being very much like, well, I'm not going to be that, whatever that was that I was, pointing at from my aunts or my mom or whatever. And a lot of that was, as you said, it was pain, right? I didn't understand what they were dealing with. And fortunately for me, and it was a very encouraging moment that I shared with my friends. And then they were sharing, and we were just pouring into each other. But the point is that being able to go back to these generations, so your mom, and have these conversations with forgiveness, and be able to say, I didn't understand. I may never fully understand, but being able to have these very authentic conversations with her, and she tell me things that maybe I was wrong about, it was very, very freeing. But I totally agree with you, Jill, when you said about healing, and that at the root of all of this is pain. I would say at the root of all of this is sin.
Oh yeah, of
the,
course.
the devil is trying to really pervert the way that we think about things. And it really is very freeing, I think, when we really just have conversations in a way that are authentic and loving and forgiving. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
No, I love that. I love that. I don't know if you want to answer this, Sean, what Tony said.
Yes. And so she posted in the chat, are these generational cycles of curses keeping us single? And the answer is yes, it can, depending on what you're dealing with. And as scripture teaches that his people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. And so it is that coming to the awareness of what we're dealing with and who we are. And by doing that, we're able to have another set of tools to combat us really. Because as I said to begin with, this is meant more so to be reflective than it is to be accusatory. And so by having that opportunity to pull away the curtain to look at us, we can then better present a better version of ourselves to who we will come in contact with.
To touch on what Sean just said, as well as JL, um, I keep bringing up like self-reflection because I feel like it's just super important. Like Sean said, reflecting. Most of us, don't see a therapist on a regular. So I feel like if we don't do that, we still, even if we do that, we still need to do self-evaluation, self-reflection, because I feel like someone asked, if that, stops us from having meaningful relationship. Of course it does, because if you don't reflect and see how you could be contributing something harmful in a relationship, it's like what they say about you can't address what you don't understand or acknowledge, right? You won't be able to get to the highest level of any relationship if you think you're always right, if you think you never do anything wrong. So a reflection is so key, into building any relationship. And JL mentioned something about, you know, um, um, like forgiving. For example, like I realized after reflection, I don't do the best when it comes to, certain aspects of my relationship. And I wondered why, I allowed myself to I don't want to say willingly, but unknowingly participate in some sexual situations. And I was just like, you know what? And I was reflecting, I was like, you know what? It's my mom's fault. It's my mom. She didn't teach me this, so and so and so on. It's her fault. Like if I had a mom just like my friend that was living down the street, and my friend, could talk to her mom about everything, about sex, about this, about that. And, she got better off. If I had the same type of mother, I would have been better off. But then I did the evaluation from my family, where did it start from the generation? And I realized my mom didn't have that within her own mother. You know, her mom died very early when she was hardly a teenager. So if she didn't have that type of relationship with her own mom, how can I expect her to have that relationship with me? So that's where I learned to heal and learned to forgive my own mother and say, you know what, it's not my mom's fault. At least I'm glad that I recognize, you know, the situation as it is so I can do better for my future children.
And there you pointed out something that's key. The sexual act was the thing, but the detachment from your mom was two separate things. So there's a difference between the curse and how that curse manifests itself.
Can you elaborate on that? What you mean by the way that it manifests itself?
For example, let's say someone struggles and deals with abuse. One of the things that people do to cope with abuse is by self harm. The abusiveness itself is the curse, but the self harm is how it's manifesting because of dealing with it.
Gotcha. So basically the coping aspect of that. Hmm.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
so, and this is where too, I think, where we have so many different terms to call the same thing. Um, and so definitely it goes back to what you were saying earlier about how we cope with the different things we're dealing with. I would like to actually go backwards in the chat a little bit. Um, Danny asked a question earlier about um, generational curses that we're unaware of and what we do with that. You can't even say what we do with that knowledge because there's a lack of knowledge there. And so my answer to that, Danny, is that that's once again where our relationship with Christ begins to develop and he begins to show us. And I don't know if anyone has ever done this, but when you're studying the Word of God and then you begin reflecting on its application in our life, it began to sometimes expose things about you that you didn't realize you didn't like. That's just like with King David, how he had taken a man's wife and then tried to have or did have him killed. And then a prophet came and presented the same exact scenario with the different names of the people doing the acts. And David said, "Oh, that person should be put to death." Well, the prophet said, "Well, you're the worst person that's doing this." And so sometimes in reading and studying our scripture, we find that um, it begins to show us who we are because then we begin to identify with some of the characters that we see that are being played out within the stories that we're reading and studying. And through that, we'll then be able to become aware of more of those things. It's and that's why we call it a relationship versus calling it something that does not denote a process. It is ongoing. I have a saying that says the day that we reach perfection is when we die. We're always working on ourselves. We're always looking to improve in some area of our life. And so you'll begin to find out more and more things as our relationship with Christ grows about ourselves. And then also to understand and know that we will not be able to be the supreme breaker of every bondage within our family or with every relationship that we live with. There was only one person that was able to do that, which was Christ. And it is through Christ that we fall under his grace. And as C. Jones said earlier, through the washing of his blood, can obtain salvation and contain wholeness.